It's as strong as a spell. I'll never tell. Yeah, I like you, that's for sure.
Hi guys, welcome back to Exmo Lex. A few weeks ago, I asked my Facebook followers, what are some things that you no longer feel guilty about since leaving the Mormon church? One of the things that I constantly felt guilty for was not really wanting to go to church on Sundays. If you're unfamiliar with Mormonism, the church plays a huge role in people's lives. You are pretty much constantly doing church-related things, whether it be church for 3 hours on Sunday. I think they changed it to 2, but when I was a member, it was 3 hours a day each Sunday. On top of having different callings in the church, if you were more active in the church, you generally had a calling where you would have to prepare lessons or things like that. Then there were like youth activities during the week. Sometimes there were women's activities during the week. Sometimes there were like campouts for the youth. There was cleaning the church building, going to the temple. Like there are all sorts of things that you are constantly participating in as a church member. And sometimes, especially that 3-hour meeting on Sunday just felt like a lot. This was the worst for me when I had little kids. I had all of my 4 children, one right after the other. So at some point I had 2 under 2, 3 under 3, and 4 under 4. And taking that many little babies to church where they had to sit still and be quiet and I had to be in charge of making sure that that happened felt so overwhelming. So a lot of times I really did not feel like going to church, especially when I was pregnant. Those seats in the chapel were not comfortable and it just made my whole body ache. And so a lot of times, you know, if I had a little headache, I really didn't want to go to church and we would skip out on it sometimes. And I used to feel really guilty about that. I prayed about it a lot. I would have a lot of really like guilty feelings, feel a lot of shame for not being as active as I could be at church. So since leaving the church, it's been really nice to not have this burden of this big commitment that I had every single Sunday and feeling, you know, tons of guilt and shame if I didn't make it. So I was curious what other sorts of things people once felt guilty about but no longer do. Sometimes when I make videos about the church, the topics can kind of be very heavy and sad and negative. And that's mostly because, well, the church has done a lot of negative things and they've lied about things, and those sorts of really heavy, sad topics can make us feel very heavy and sad. So today I want to talk about something that relieves some of those heavy feelings. Something like, what do you no longer feel guilty about? There were a ton of comments on that post, so if you want to see more of them, here is the post where you can go find it on my Facebook page. I no longer feel guilty about supporting my LGBTQ+ friends and family. Love is love. That's something that I really love too. And I also feel really good no longer having these like conflicting and confusing feelings about. When I was a member of the church, part of the time I was just really homophobic and awful, but as time went by, I started being more compassionate and more understanding, but while at the same time trying to follow the church, follow the gospel, and being gay or LGBTQ in any way was not okay in the church. And so I had a lot of like conflicting feelings about like, I want to have compassion and love is love and it doesn't matter, it doesn't affect me, and it doesn't, you know, love is love. But then also like, well, the church says that that's not okay and we shouldn't support that, and I'm not supposed to support anything that goes against church doctrine and the church. And it was really hard for me to, you know, play both sides of the coin. After leaving the church, I have zero qualms about 100% fully supporting the LGBTQ community and have since come out as bisexual myself. I love not having to be put in situations that cause trauma and anxiety for me. I don't have to feel excluded for being a single mom. I am definitely not having to do things I am not comfortable with, like the Masonic rites that were made in the temple ceremony. The first time I went, I was scared and weirded out. I told my mother after that I could care less if sentinels killed me at that point. I felt a lot of the same feelings, and I also felt guilty about it. The first time I went through the temple, you know, they tell you before anything happens that if you're not prepared for it, you can leave. But that's before you know what's going to happen. And I remember being like, that's kind of weird. And as the ceremony progressed, being like, you know, as these like outfits come out, as there's all these wardrobe changes, as there's like chanting, I more and more was like, ooh, this doesn't feel good. I remember specifically having the thought, it feels like I'm in a cult. And then immediately being like, oh my gosh, don't smite me. I didn't mean that. And, you know, by the end of that first time going through the temple, I had been able to sort of like lock that away and be like, yeah, okay, a little bit odd, but it's fine. I'm not in a cult. This is all good. And I tried really hard to suppress those feelings and not feel that way whenever I went to the temple. And I tried to just, you know, put all of the negativity aside and be like, you know, that's just Satan trying to draw me away from the church. So I tried really hard. I tried really, really hard to just be a good Mormon and accept the temple ceremony as it was. But deep down inside, I didn't like it. And I didn't feel very comfortable. I felt like the ceremony was really long and boring. I felt like a lot of the things that we were learning while we were there were things that we already knew before we got there. The handshakes and the, you know, the secret combinations felt like it was a little bit weird that you would need that to get into heaven. And a lot of the temple workers would not be very kind if you were not like quick enough on getting the different handshakes and things correct. And it gave me a lot of anxiety. So I totally understand being glad to be over that and no longer having guilt about having those feelings, because I definitely felt that way too. I drive past the churches and say out loud, those poor buggers in there sitting through 3 hours of torture. Then I go eat somewhere nice and don't feel one jot of guilt. Isn't that so nice? I remember the first Sunday that I decided not to participate in church, we went to Target, and like, it's funny because now I wouldn't think anything of that, but at the time I remember walking around the whole time we were there being like, oh my gosh, we're not at church. Oh my gosh, this is so weird. And I wouldn't say I felt a lot of guilt at that time, but if I had ever not kept the Sabbath day holy in the past, if I had gone shopping or stopped to get gas or gotten food or anything like that, I would feel a lot of guilt over it. So it's really, really nice when those feelings are gone. Drinking tea. I always loved tea. It's relaxing and a form of self-care for me. I always wanted to drink actual tea and would occasionally drink green tea but feel super ashamed. Now I can just enjoy it. It's so funny to me when I look back on my time in the church and remember that things like tea were not acceptable. Personally, I really, really love chai, which is a type of black tea, which is against the word of wisdom in the church, so I couldn't drink it. I went through like a phase for about 6 to 8 months when I was a teenager where I drank it anyway and felt super, super guilty about it. And then I stopped. I swore off my tea use completely. I agree. It's so nice to be able to drink tea guilt-free. Wearing the clothes that I want and feel most comfortable in. Absolutely. Isn't it so nice? This is another thing that during the summer, when I'm just wearing whatever clothes are the most comfortable for me, occasionally I'll remember like, this would not have been okay at all as a member of the church. And it's stuff that I wouldn't think anything about anymore. I don't think anything about, you know, modesty and these sorts of arbitrary rules that the church had laid out for us. But when it gets to like 105 degrees in July, wearing shorts that go all the way down to my knees and a t-shirt that covers everything just isn't comfortable anymore. It's sweaty. And it's really, really nice to be able to just wear clothes that make me feel happy and comfortable. And this would even apply to things that I think are generally considered modest by most people. When I got married and went through the temple and had to start wearing garments, obviously you have to wear clothes that cover the garments. And I had some really cute sweaters and things that I could no longer wear just because, you know, maybe the collar came out all the way to like here, and the garments were maybe like, I don't know, a ½ inch closer on each side, so it showed, and I couldn't find a way to keep the sweater from moving over and showing my garment, so I just had to get rid of it. And I had several clothes like that that I don't think were immodest by really anybody's standard, but they wouldn't work with the garment, and it was just awful. It's great to be able to wear things that make you feel happy and comfortable and confident, guilt-free. Swearing. I used to hold it all inside and I no longer do so. Extremely liberating. Hell yeah. Letting go of the constant guilt about all the busy work. Journaling, praying, scripture study, FHE, family history work, visiting, teaching, food storage, lesson prep. Such a relief not to carry that guilt around anymore. This is one of the things that I honestly feel like sort of goes into some of the things that make the church a cult. Some of these, like, you forget about, especially when you haven't been in the church for a long time, but there are so many things that you are expected to participate in as a member of the church. They keep you so busy with all of this stuff, and then you have all of this guilt if you're not staying busy with it, that you're just like, you constantly have church on the brain. The church, the church, the church. All of these things add up. And then if you're not doing all of them the way that the church expects you to, oh, the shame, oh, the guilt. Man, I'm so glad to not be caught up in that world anymore. Free Sundays ranks pretty high in my list of things I love about leaving the Mormon church. Agreed, same here. Relaxing on Sunday, drinking coffee and tea, and we were able to pay off so much debt without tithing. Oh, and wearing comfortable clothes that I like. So much guilt about swearing. No more. Drinking tea and coffee. It took a long time for the guilt to go away. I no longer feel bad about reading literature not approved by the church. I may read what I want. I like using reason as well. As for garments, do I even need to say? I thought I was such a terrible, inadequate mother. Really, I just had really effed up set of unrealistic expectations. I was in fact a reasonably good mom who made tons of mistakes but kept getting up when I fell and trying again. I feel the same way. I had a lot more guilt as a mother when I was in the church. And I think that part of that, comes from the massive amount of things that are expected of you because you have so many things you're supposed to participate in and do. But also from the fact that in the church, I feel like people are not encouraged to take care of themselves first. You are supposed to take care of others first. And, there's something to be said about being a selfless person, about giving yourself to others and being kind and giving and all of these things. But I really feel like since leaving the church, I've been able to take better care of myself and put myself first, which in turn helps me to help other people and be a better mom and be a better wife when I can be a little bit selfish and have time to myself. It's like they say, you can't pour from an empty cup. And at times in the church, my cup was bone dry. My cup had dust in it. I think I'm going to stop there for now. There are so many comments on that post. If you want to read more of them, like I said, you can find it on my Facebook page. But I would love to see more comments here telling me what sorts of things you're so glad you no longer have to feel guilty about since leaving the church. So thank you guys so much for being here. I really appreciate it. And a special thank you to my patrons for supporting the channel. I appreciate you guys so much. Extra special thank you to Craig Call, Doug Davis, Noble Monster Comics, Tans, and the Exmo Candle Co. for supporting at the Demon tier on my Patreon. If you guys would like to support the channel, there are links to do so in the description below. I have a lot of different options. I've got Patreon, I've got merch, and I really appreciate it when you guys help support the channel so I can continue doing what I'm doing. And I've also got links to all my other social media in the description, so if you want to see more content, I've got Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok as well, so you can find me there. Thank you for being here. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to leave a comment telling me one thing that you no longer feel guilty about since leaving the church, and I will see you guys next time. Bye.
Just trust that I'll keep it locked in a cell. Never